What's up everybody, this is Happy to Game here. Today I'm going to be talking about beginner hotkeys and control group setups. This is a kind of quick guide for any new beginner having problems figuring out the hotkeys and what kind of control groups they should be using. So here's the video. Also, I just want to say that this is my preferred setup. This is by no means the best setup. Use this as a guideline. Use this video as an idea generation for your own setup, and maybe it'll give you some ideas on how you want to change things to fit you better. At the end of the day, the best hotkey setup is the one that feels best to you. There's no such thing as the best setup except for the one that feels more natural to you. Alright, so for the most part, I actually keep a lot of my hotkeys pretty simple, and I actually keep a lot of the default settings, and so that's what I'm going to kind of go through. I'm going to kind of go through what I've kept and what I've changed. So for the most part, I've kept a QWERT format. So what that means is, if you look at your this section over here to your left, bottom left here, this is going to be Q, the next to it will be Q, W, E, R, and then T, right? And this kind of goes down, so this now is G. So if you unpause here and you click on a villager and you want to build, you press Q, and let's say you want to build a town center, it's Z, right? So it's kind of corresponding to your keyboard, right? So if you wanted to build a mill, it's W, mining camp, it's E. So this way, if you memorize where the building is located here, you should be able to memorize the hotkey itself. So if you wanted to build a dock, for example, you know that's T. Over here will be E. S is here. So again, I've kept that as the default, or that is the default for Age of Empires 2, and I've kept that. Okay, so just an FYI. Alright, so this is the unit groups at the very bottom middle here, and I'm going to quickly kind of go over this setup that I have. So for me, group 1 is typically my scout or my cavalry, essentially my horse units or my eagle scouts, anything that's kind of the my speedy units essentially. I have it set to 1. Now a lot of you might be asking, well, why don't you have, you know, your other units in there with you? Now the reason being is because if you notice, look at the speed. Do you see the second I add a foot soldier, an archer, anything that's kind of not on a horse, the speed of the movement is super slow, and I don't want this, right? I want to be able to, and now, so for me to remove this character, I'm just going to control, and it's going to remove it from the group, and then now I'm just going to press control 1 again to put them back into its own group, and to remove the archer from the group. I'm going to move the archer back to group number 2, and as you can see, moving back and forth, it is quite fast. It is quite a bit faster, okay? To illustrate this even better, probably, I can probably put this into unit 2, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to move it over here, and quickly move 2 over there. You can already see the speed difference, right? I'm even going to do it back this way, with
Hurry up. You can
them
still
going
earn
first,
a bronze medal.
and you're going to see that the group without the archer in it is actually faster. Okay, so that's usually why I typically like to keep my scouts and my cavalry in its own separate group. Alright, so group number 2 is, like I said, essentially anything that's not on a horse. So I have all my my pikemen and my archers here on group 2, and again, this way I can have my scouts flanking. You know, they can quickly flank and move around an army, click and run past buildings and defenses and stuff like that. Okay, and then number 3 is going to be my siege weapons. So I typically like to keep my siege weapons on a separate group for 1, easy selection of them and control of them, and 3, again, they don't slow down the speed of my other units. Alright, so for group number 4, I typically have all my town centers grouped together. So now when I press 4, I have all of my town centers selected, and this way I can just press Q and it will queue up villagers without having me go like this. Typically you'll go HQ, 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 which isn't bad by any means, but in case now I can just go 4 Q Q Q Q Q Q Q Q Q, and it'll just queue up all of my villagers that I want to produce. Now typically I do still use the H hotkey to go and switch between town centers, and that's mostly because I want to make sure that I have my hotkeys or my rally points set properly. So that's still very, very handy, especially if you want to like center your camera to the town center specifically. Alright, and lastly, for my group 5, I typically have anything that isn't producing villagers or military units, typically mostly just upgrade buildings. So for example, in my group 5 here, I have my mill, I have my market, I have my blacksmith, monastery, my university, and my lumber camp. So this way, when I'm, you know, busy looking at my opponent, I can quickly go here, press 5, go to my lumber mill, make sure that my things are upgraded, click 5 again, go to the marketplace, and quickly go and buy and sell things on the market. I believe the regular hotkey is Control M, and I don't know about you all, but for me, Control M is kind of a really weird hotkey, having to like stretch out my hands like that. So I'd like to just go 5, click on the market, and do my thing here. 5, click on my blacksmith, do my upgrades. 5 again, click my monastery, you know, train my monk. 5, go to university, you know, upgrade, do my upgrades, and same with my lumber camp. Okay, so that's typically my hotkey group setup there. 5 for pretty much my upgrade buildings. Okay, so now we're gonna go over some hotkeys that I've changed from the default because, like I said, they were way off onto the other side of the keyboard. So the idle villager one, typically this is the period button, and I've changed it to the tilde key or the grave key, which is next to the 1, right underneath the escape key and right next to the 1 on top of the tab. So now when I click on this, I don't have to move my fingers to the period button or key. I just go to the tilde key, and there he is. There's the villager, right? Another hotkey that I think that's very useful, that I didn't change, that I kept as default, but I want to mention, is spacebar Control Shift. Spacebar Control Shift will select any military building, including the monastery, and this way, if you're in heat of the battle, you can quickly go Control Shift A, and you can change all of your rally points to your military buildings very easily that way, right? Like let's say you're advancing your army through this way and you want your reinforcements to come right behind. You can just go Control Shift spacebar, and you can just click here, for example, and your army, any new produced units are going to come here. So that's very, very useful. So by default, if you go into your hotkey settings, you're going to have something called game commands. And in game commands, select all archery ranges. Control Shift A is actually a pretty good hotkey. And what this is going to do is it's going to select all your archery ranges that you have built. Now, once you get to something like select all barracks, Control Shift B starts to feel a little bit weird, right? Control Shift B, which is the default, and I've changed it here to just Control B because for me that feels a lot more comfortable. There's not too many instances where I'm only going to want to select one barracks. If I have multiple barracks, I'm going to want to probably build from all of my barracks. So for me, this one right here, the go-to barracks, for example, which is Control B by default, that doesn't make sense for me. Like, I don't use this, okay? I'm just kind of highlighting that this is the default. So go to archery range is by default Control A. So let me just show you how that works. So if I go Control A, Control A, Control A, it will select each individual archery range and cycle through each one that I have, right? To me, this is completely useless. If I'm in the heat of a battle and I just want to build my archers, I want to be able to just select it like that. So by default it's Control Shift A, and I have all my archery ranges selected. I want to just be able to make my archers, right? I don't want to have to go here and select my units that I want to produce, right? So I've gone in and I've changed that. So for game commands, I have changed my select all archeries to Control A, because I think that that's going to be a lot easier. So Control A, and when I go to my cycles here, I'm just going to clear this. I'm going to reset, or I'm going to clear. So that's the first thing that I've changed. So archery ranges, I've changed it to A. Barracks is Control B. Select all blacksmiths, Control Shift S. That's fine for me because I don't use Control Shift S. Now this by default, select all castles. This is by default, I believe, is Control V, which doesn't make sense to me. So if I reset this, yeah, Control Shift V. So to me, that doesn't make a lot of sense. So I actually changed this to Control C, because in my brain, a castle, C, castle, to me, it just makes more sense. So another one that I changed with this was the Siege Workshop. By default, it's Control Shift K, which completely is on the opposite side of the keyboard and doesn't make any sense to me to why it's considered K. So I actually changed this one to Control W. So now it selects all of the Siege Workshops, because to me, obviously S would be ideal, but you'll see that I use S for stables. And W is like workshop, so it's kind of like the next thing that kind of clicks with me a lot easier. And then by default, here, let me show you what default. So the default for stables is L, which to me doesn't make any sense. And because I use the scout build order very commonly, and because I use cavalry civilizations, I use the stables a lot. So I actually changed this to Control S. So change Control S. And then because I made all those changes, by default, again, like I said before, go to archery range by default is Control A, right? But I've completely changed that now to select all archery ranges to Control A. So all you have to do is go here and just go to clear selected. And what that's going to do is, so for example, if you go select here, change selected, clear, and now it's just going to essentially null it out and say there is no hotkey for this, because like I said, I don't see a reason why I would want to just go to an archery range one by one. All right, well, that's pretty much the video. Thank you so much for watching. If you found that really useful, make sure you give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and I'll see y'all next time. Bye now.